Have you ever noticed how almost every love story begins the same way? Two people meet, they laugh together, they can't stop thinking about each other. Every conversation feels effortless, every moment seems magical, and the future appears brighter simply because the other person is in it. In those early days, love feels like pure happiness. It fills ordinary moments with excitement and gives life a new sense of purpose. It's no wonder so many people come to believe that happiness is the very definition of love. We grow up surrounded by stories that reinforce this idea. Movies end the moment two people finally get together, as if that single kiss guarantees a lifetime of joy. Songs celebrate butterflies, passion, and unforgettable romance. Social media overflows with carefully chosen snapshots of smiling couples traveling together, exchanging gifts, or sharing perfect sunsets. Rarely do we see the arguments, the disappointments, the sleepless nights, or the quiet moments when choosing love feels much harder than falling into it. Slowly, without realizing it, many of us begin measuring our relationships by one simple question: does this person make me happy? At first, it sounds like a reasonable question. After all, why would anyone choose a relationship that brings constant pain? But hidden inside that question is a dangerous misunderstanding. Because happiness is a feeling, and feelings were never designed to remain the same forever. Think about your own life. There are days when you wake up full of energy, optimistic about everything ahead. Then there are days when nothing particularly bad has happened, yet you feel exhausted, overwhelmed, or emotionally distant. Your feelings change with your health, your stress, your responsibilities, and even the amount of sleep you got the night before. If emotions naturally rise and fall within one person, how could two different people possibly experience constant happiness together for years? They can't. And that's exactly where many relationships begin to break. Not because love disappears, but because expectations collide with reality. Many couples mistake the end of excitement for the end of love. The butterflies become quieter. The conversations become more ordinary. Life introduces bills, responsibilities, careers, children, aging parents, unexpected illnesses, financial setbacks, and disappointments neither partner could have predicted. Suddenly, love no longer feels like the effortless emotion it once was. It feels like work, and that realization frightens people. Some assume they chose the wrong partner. Others begin chasing the excitement they once felt with someone new, believing happiness itself has become their compass. They search for another beginning, another honeymoon phase, another emotional high, convinced that somewhere out there exists a relationship where love never becomes difficult. But every new relationship eventually reaches the same destination. Not because love fails, because reality always arrives. Real love is never tested during the easy seasons. Anyone can love when life is comfortable. Anyone can smile when every plan succeeds. Anyone can promise forever while everything feels exciting. The true measure of love appears when comfort begins to disappear. Imagine sitting beside someone in a hospital room after hours of uncertainty. The excitement that once filled your first dates is nowhere to be found. There are no glamorous photographs, no romantic music, no audience applauding your devotion. There is only uncertainty, fatigue, and a quiet decision to remain present. Or imagine staying awake late into the night listening to someone you love struggle with fear, grief, or self-doubt. You are tired. You have your own worries. Part of you wants to rest, yet you choose to listen because, in that moment, their need matters as much as your own comfort. These moments rarely appear in fairy tales, yet they reveal something far more meaningful than butterflies ever could. Love begins to show its true character when it asks something of us. This doesn't mean love is supposed to be painful, nor does it mean healthy relationships require endless suffering. There is an important difference between sacrifice and self-destruction. Healthy love never asks you to lose your dignity, abandon your values, or tolerate abuse. Sacrifice is not about accepting harm. It is about willingly giving pieces of your comfort, your time, your patience, and your pride because you genuinely care about another person's well-being. That distinction changes everything. Unfortunately, our culture often confuses these ideas. Some people believe sacrifice means staying in relationships that consistently destroy their peace. Others reject the very idea of sacrifice because they fear losing themselves. Neither extreme captures what real love looks like. Real sacrifice is not forced. It is chosen. No one can demand genuine love from another person. Love reveals itself through voluntary decisions made over and over again, especially when those decisions become inconvenient. Think about the people who have influenced your life the most. Perhaps it was a parent who worked long hours to provide opportunities they never had themselves. Perhaps it was a friend who stood beside you during the darkest chapter of your life, without expecting anything in return. Perhaps it was a teacher who believed in you long before you believed in yourself. Their love was probably not remembered because they constantly made you happy. It was remembered because they consistently gave something of themselves: time, energy, patience, hope, attention. These gifts often require sacrifice. Ironically, the sacrifices that shape our lives are rarely dramatic. They happen quietly. A husband choosing to apologize first instead of winning an argument. A wife encouraging her partner after another difficult day despite feeling exhausted herself. Parents giving up personal dreams so their children have greater opportunities. Adult children rearranging their schedules to care for aging parents who once cared for them. Friends answering late-night phone calls because they know someone is hurting. None of these actions make headlines. Yet, together, they form the invisible foundation upon which lasting relationships are built. If love existed only to maximize happiness, very few of these choices would make sense. Why wake up in the middle of the night for a crying baby? Why remain beside someone through illness? Why forgive after disappointment? Why keep showing kindness when frustration feels easier? The answer is simple. Because love has grown beyond emotion. It has become commitment. And commitment often asks for sacrifice before it offers satisfaction. This is one of the greatest paradoxes of human relationships. Many people spend years searching for someone who will make them happy. Few spend equal time becoming someone capable of loving another person well. One approach asks, "What can I receive?" The other quietly asks, "What am I willing to give?" Those two questions create entirely different relationships. When happiness becomes the only goal, disappointment eventually wins. Every conflict feels like evidence that something is wrong. Every difficult season becomes a reason to leave. Every imperfection becomes proof that love has faded. But when love is understood as a daily willingness to choose another person, even when life becomes complicated, ordinary moments take on extraordinary meaning. Making dinner together after a long day, holding hands in silence, offering encouragement instead of criticism, choosing forgiveness over resentment. These small decisions may seem insignificant on their own, but over years, they become the language through which love speaks most clearly. Perhaps that is why the strongest relationships often appear surprisingly ordinary from the outside. They are not built on constant excitement. They are built on countless invisible sacrifices that nobody else ever notices. And maybe that is the truth our generation needs to hear most. Love is not simply something we feel. It is something we repeatedly choose. The feeling may inspire the first step, but the choice determines every step that follows. As you continue listening, consider one question that may be more important than asking whether someone truly loves you. Ask yourself this instead: when love eventually asks something difficult of me, what will I be willing to sacrifice? Because the answer to that question may reveal the true depth of your love far more honestly than happiness ever could. There is a moment in almost every relationship that no one prepares us for. It doesn't arrive with dramatic music or an obvious warning. It often slips into our lives disguised as an ordinary Tuesday. One person comes home exhausted from work. Another is overwhelmed by responsibilities they never expected to carry. Conversations become shorter. Smiles become less frequent. The excitement that once came so naturally now requires effort. At first, it feels temporary. We're just busy. We've both been under a lot of stress. Things will get better next month. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. But whether the difficult season lasts for weeks or years, it reveals something that happiness alone never could. It reveals what each person believes love is actually for. If someone believes love exists only to make them feel good, every hardship becomes evidence that the relationship is failing. Every disagreement feels like a sign they chose the wrong partner. Every sacrifice feels unfair because it interrupts the happiness they expected to receive. But if someone understands that love is also a commitment to another person's well-being, difficulty is viewed differently. The question changes. Instead of asking, "Why isn't this relationship making me happy anymore?" they begin asking, "How can we grow through this together?" That small shift in perspective changes everything. Think about a tree standing in the middle of a field. On calm, sunny days, every tree looks strong. Its leaves are full, its branches stretch confidently toward the sky, and anyone passing by assumes its roots are healthy. But no one truly knows how deep those roots go until the storm arrives. The wind pushes against every branch. Rain softens the ground beneath it. Lightning tears through the darkness. Only then does the strength hidden beneath the surface become visible. Relationships are remarkably similar. The easy seasons are beautiful, but they don't reveal much. The difficult seasons expose the roots. Patience, trust, humility, forgiveness, commitment. These qualities are invisible during comfort, but they become essential when life begins to shake everything else. Perhaps you've noticed that the happiest couples aren't necessarily those who have experienced the fewest problems. In fact, many of the strongest marriages have survived financial collapse, serious illness, family conflict, grief, disappointment, or years of uncertainty. Their strength wasn't built because suffering is magical. Their strength was built because each challenge forced them to choose one another again, choice after choice, day after day, year after year. This is something modern culture often struggles to understand. We celebrate chemistry, we admire passion, we chase excitement, but chemistry introduces people. Character keeps them together. Imagine two people who deeply care for each other. One day, one of them loses a job they spent years building toward. Confidence disappears almost overnight. They become quieter, more anxious, perhaps even more irritable. The other partner suddenly has a choice. They can interpret those changes as evidence that their relationship has become less enjoyable, or they can recognize that the person they love is carrying a burden heavier than words can describe. The first response focuses on personal happiness. The second reflects sacrificial love, not because supporting someone is always pleasant, but because genuine love often says, "I won't leave simply because this season became difficult." Notice something important here. Sacrifice doesn't always involve grand gestures. More often, it appears in moments so small that they seem almost invisible. Choosing to stay calm during an argument instead of saying words that cannot be taken back. Listening without immediately defending yourself. Giving someone time to heal instead of demanding instant change. Celebrating another person's success without allowing jealousy to grow. Offering encouragement when criticism would be easier. These choices rarely receive recognition. Yet, together, they shape the emotional atmosphere of an entire relationship. Over time, people begin trusting not just your words, but your consistency. Anyone can promise forever during a beautiful sunset. The harder question is whether those promises survive ordinary life. Because ordinary life is where most love stories are actually written. Not during anniversaries. Not during vacations. Not during carefully planned celebrations. But while washing dishes, driving to work, paying bills, taking care of sick family members, making difficult decisions together, sharing silence after a long day. These ordinary moments become sacred because they quietly ask the same question over and over again. Will you still choose this person today? The answer is rarely spoken aloud. It is expressed through actions. Sometimes we imagine sacrifice as losing something, giving up comfort, giving up time, giving up convenience. And in one sense, that's true. Every meaningful relationship costs something. Friendship costs time. Parenthood costs sleep. Marriage costs selfishness. Trust costs vulnerability. Commitment costs freedom to always put yourself first. Anything valuable demands investment. No one expects to build a successful career without effort. No one expects physical health without discipline. Yet many people expect extraordinary relationships without sacrifice. That expectation creates disappointment long before reality does. Perhaps the greatest misunderstanding is believing sacrifice weakens us. In healthy love, the opposite often happens. Sacrifice stretches our capacity for compassion. It teaches patience we didn't know we possessed. It softens pride. It transforms selfishness into generosity. Over time, we become not only better partners, but better human beings. This doesn't happen overnight. In fact, some of the most loving people you'll ever meet probably weren't naturally patient. They became patient because life repeatedly invited them to choose patience over frustration. They weren't born forgiving. They learned forgiveness after discovering the weight of resentment. They weren't always selfless. They slowly realized that lasting joy often comes from giving more than receiving. This is why love should never be confused with constant emotional excitement. Excitement rises quickly. Character grows slowly. And while excitement may begin a relationship, character is what carries it through decades. There is another uncomfortable truth we often avoid. Sometimes sacrifice goes unnoticed. You prepare a meal, and no one says thank you. You work overtime to support your family, and your effort becomes routine. You stay emotionally available while carrying your own private struggles. You forgive without hearing the apology you hoped for. In moments like these, people naturally wonder, does any of this matter? The answer depends on why you sacrifice in the first place. If every act of kindness is simply a transaction meant to guarantee appreciation, disappointment becomes inevitable. But genuine love gives, because loving itself reflects the kind of person you choose to become. That doesn't mean you should allow yourself to be exploited or remain where respect has disappeared. Healthy love still requires mutual care, honesty, and boundaries. Sacrifice is never permission for someone else to neglect your worth. Instead, sacrifice becomes beautiful when both people gradually learn to place each other's well-being alongside their own. It becomes a partnership rather than a competition. Neither person keeps score. Neither person constantly asks, "What am I getting?" Instead, each quietly wonders, "What can I give today that helps us become stronger together?" Ironically, relationships built on this mindset often become the happiest, not because happiness was chased directly, but because trust, respect, and security naturally grew from countless acts of selfless love. Maybe happiness was never meant to be the foundation of love. Maybe it was always meant to be one of its fruits. The roots lie deeper. They are hidden beneath everyday choices. Choices no one applauds. Choices no one posts online. Choices that slowly shape two imperfect people into partners capable of weathering storms together. And perhaps that's why the most beautiful love stories are rarely the loudest ones. They are written quietly, one sacrifice at a time. Because in the end, love is not measured by how brightly it shines on the easiest days. It is measured by how faithfully it continues to shine when darkness arrives. There is a strange paradox at the heart of every meaningful relationship. The people who are obsessed with being happy often struggle to find lasting happiness. Meanwhile, the people who focus on loving well frequently discover a joy they never expected. At first, that sounds backward. Shouldn't happiness come first? Shouldn't we make sure our own emotional needs are completely satisfied before we give anything to someone else? Modern culture often tells us exactly that. Protect your peace. Choose yourself. Never compromise. Never settle. Never let anyone inconvenience you. There is wisdom in some of these ideas. Boundaries matter. Self-respect matters. Emotional health matters. But somewhere, along the way, an important truth was lost. A life built entirely around protecting your own comfort becomes incredibly lonely. Because every meaningful relationship eventually asks us to make room for someone else's needs. And the moment another person's needs begin to matter, sacrifice enters the picture. Think about the happiest elderly couples you've ever met. They rarely describe 50 years together by talking about endless romance. Instead, they tell stories. Stories about surviving difficult winters. Stories about working 2 jobs. Stories about raising children with very little money. Stories about caring for one another through sickness. Stories about mistakes, forgiveness, and second chances. If you listen carefully, you'll notice something fascinating. The memories they treasure most are often the seasons that demanded the greatest sacrifices. Not because suffering itself is beautiful, but because shared sacrifice created a bond that comfort alone never could. Psychologists have observed something similar in many areas of life. People tend to value what they have invested themselves in. A garden becomes precious because someone spent months planting and caring for it. A handmade gift often means more than an expensive purchase because it contains hours of someone's time. A lifelong friendship becomes irreplaceable because both people have walked through years of victories and disappointments together. Investment creates attachment. Love works the same way. Every sacrifice says, "This relationship matters enough for me to give a part of myself." Little by little, those choices deepen emotional connection. Ironically, many people today are searching for relationships that require almost no sacrifice. They want effortless communication, effortless understanding, effortless compatibility, effortless commitment, effortless happiness. But anything effortless is usually fragile. Imagine buying a musical instrument for the first time. You fall in love with the idea of playing beautiful music. Then, reality arrives. Your fingers hurt. The notes sound terrible. Practice feels repetitive. If you quit because it stopped feeling enjoyable, you'll never experience the beauty waiting on the other side of perseverance. Relationships are remarkably similar. The first stage is exciting because everything feels new. The second stage becomes challenging because reality replaces imagination. The third stage, where lasting love is built, belongs only to those willing to grow together. Unfortunately, many people mistake the discomfort of growth for evidence that something is wrong. In reality, growth almost always feels uncomfortable. A child learning to walk falls countless times. An athlete becomes stronger by placing muscles under strain. A student develops through years of difficult study. Why should love be any different? Why would we expect the deepest human connection to develop without requiring patience, humility, and sacrifice? Perhaps one of the greatest misunderstandings about sacrifice is believing it always feels noble. Most of the time, it doesn't. Sometimes sacrifice looks incredibly ordinary. It looks like biting your tongue instead of saying something cruel in the middle of an argument. It looks like apologizing before your pride feels ready. It looks like putting your phone away because someone you love deserves your full attention. It looks like waking up early to help your family, even when you'd rather sleep. These moments rarely feel heroic. In fact, they often feel invisible. But invisible choices shape visible relationships. Imagine two couples. The first couple waits until they feel loving before acting lovingly. The second chooses loving actions even on difficult days. Which relationship becomes stronger over time? Most people instinctively know the answer. Actions often shape feelings just as much as feelings shape actions. A warm conversation can restore affection after tension. A sincere apology can soften anger. A thoughtful gesture can rebuild trust. Waiting for perfect emotions before making loving choices often keeps people trapped. Sometimes love grows because we act first, not because we felt like it. This is one of the reasons commitment matters so deeply. Commitment is not a prison. Healthy commitment creates safety. It allows two imperfect people to grow without constantly fearing abandonment every time they disappoint each other. Think about how different conversations become when both people know they are genuinely committed to working through problems. Instead of protecting themselves from rejection, they become more willing to be honest. Instead of pretending to be perfect, they admit mistakes. Instead of hiding weaknesses, they ask for help. Security creates vulnerability. Vulnerability creates intimacy. Intimacy creates trust. And trust allows love to deepen far beyond initial attraction. Of course, this doesn't mean every relationship should continue forever. Some relationships become unhealthy. Some involve manipulation, betrayal, abuse, or persistent disrespect. Walking away from those situations is not a failure of love. Sometimes love, including self-love, requires leaving what continuously destroys your dignity. Healthy sacrifice should never require abandoning your humanity. That distinction matters enormously, because true love is never built on fear. It is built on freedom, freedom to stay, freedom to give, freedom to forgive, freedom to grow. When sacrifice is freely chosen, inside a relationship built on mutual respect, it becomes one of the most powerful expressions of love imaginable. There is another lesson life quietly teaches us. Nearly every meaningful role we hold involves sacrifice. Parents sacrifice, teachers sacrifice, doctors sacrifice, friends sacrifice, leaders sacrifice. Even artists sacrifice years of unseen effort before anyone applauds their work. Why would love, the most profound human relationship of all, be the only exception? Perhaps we've misunderstood happiness itself. Maybe happiness isn't something we chase directly. Maybe happiness often arrives as a byproduct of living with purpose. Think about the moments in your own life that brought the deepest sense of fulfillment. Were they always the easiest moments? Or were they the moments when you gave your best to something bigger than yourself? Helping someone who desperately needed support, accomplishing something that required discipline, standing beside someone during a difficult season, watching another person succeed because of your encouragement. Those moments often contain exhaustion. They also contain meaning. And meaning has a remarkable ability to produce a kind of happiness far deeper than temporary pleasure. This is why so many people eventually discover that the greatest joys in life cannot be separated from responsibility. Responsibility gives our sacrifices direction. Love gives them purpose. And purpose transforms sacrifice from a burden into a gift. Not because giving is always easy, but because giving reminds us that our lives have become connected to someone else's. Perhaps this is the secret hidden inside every enduring relationship. Love is not measured by the number of days everything went perfectly. It is measured by the number of imperfect days two people chose to keep building together. Every difficult conversation, every quiet act of forgiveness, every moment of patience, every unseen kindness, every sacrifice. Together, they become the bricks that build a relationship capable of lasting through time. And maybe, years later, when people look at a couple whose love has survived every season of life, they'll wonder what their secret was. They may assume those two simply found the perfect person, but the truth is usually much simpler. They found someone who understood that love is not sustained by endless happiness. It is sustained by two people who continue choosing one another, especially when choosing becomes difficult. Because real love doesn't ask, "How long can I stay happy?" It quietly asks, "How deeply am I willing to love?" And the answer to that question has the power to change not only a relationship but an entire life. When people hear the word sacrifice, they often imagine dramatic moments. A soldier risking his life for his country, a parent working multiple jobs to feed a family, someone giving away everything they own to help another person. Those sacrifices are extraordinary, but they are also rare. The sacrifices that determine the future of most relationships are much quieter. In fact, they are so ordinary that we often fail to recognize them. The greatest sacrifice in love is usually not giving up your life. It is giving up your ego. And for many people, that is far more difficult. Think about the last serious disagreement you had with someone you cared about. Perhaps you knew you were right. Perhaps the other person misunderstood your intentions. Perhaps every part of you wanted to prove your point. Winning the argument suddenly became more important than protecting the relationship. We've all experienced moments like that. Our pride whispers the same message every time. Don't apologize first. If you give in now, they'll think you're weak. They hurt you. Let them come back first. Pride has an incredible ability to disguise itself as self-respect, but they are not the same thing. Self-respect protects your dignity. Pride protects your ego. One builds relationships. The other quietly destroys them. How many friendships have ended because neither person wanted to make the first phone call? How many marriages slowly grew cold because both partners were waiting for the other to apologize? How many families remain divided for years because everyone remembers who was wrong but no one remembers how to forgive? It is astonishing how often relationships collapse not because love disappeared, but because pride became more valuable than reconciliation. That is why one of the greatest sacrifices love ever asks of us is the sacrifice of being right. Not because truth doesn't matter. Truth always matters. Healthy relationships require honesty, but there is a profound difference between defending the truth and defending your own need to win. Sometimes, the most loving question isn't, "How do I prove my point?" It's, "How do I protect this relationship while still speaking the truth?" Those are very different goals. One seeks victory, the other seeks restoration, and restoration almost always requires humility. Humility is one of the least celebrated virtues in modern culture. We admire confidence. We admire ambition. We admire success. But humility rarely receives attention because it often looks ordinary. It looks like listening before speaking. It looks like admitting you misunderstood. It looks like changing your mind when evidence proves you wrong. It looks like saying two words that many adults struggle to say. I apologize. Those words seem so small, yet they possess incredible power. Not because they erase pain, but because they reopen the door that pride tried to close. There is another sacrifice that often goes unnoticed. The sacrifice of expectations. Every one of us enters relationships carrying invisible pictures of how love should look. Perhaps you imagined a partner who would always understand you. Perhaps you believed conflict would be rare. Perhaps you expected your spouse to meet every emotional need you have. Perhaps you assumed your children would always appreciate your sacrifices. Life rarely follows those expectations. And when reality collides with imagination, disappointment naturally follows. The question is not whether disappointment will come. It always does. The real question is what we choose to do with it. Some people allow disappointment to harden into bitterness. Others allow it to mature into understanding. The difference often comes down to expectation. Love becomes much healthier when we stop expecting perfection from imperfect people. That doesn't mean lowering standards. It means accepting reality. No human being will always understand you. No partner will always know the right thing to say. No friendship will exist without misunderstandings. No family will avoid conflict forever. Imperfection is not evidence that love has failed. It is evidence that two human beings are involved. And that realization can actually become incredibly freeing. When we stop demanding perfection, we create room for grace. Grace does not ignore mistakes. Grace simply refuses to let mistakes become the entire story. Think about someone who has loved you well. Were they perfect? Almost certainly not. Perhaps they forgot important dates. Perhaps they made poor decisions. Perhaps they disappointed you more than once. Yet somehow, when you think about them today, those imperfections no longer define them. Why? Because their consistent love became larger than their occasional failures. Shouldn't we hope to offer others the same generosity? There is another sacrifice few people discuss. The sacrifice of keeping score. Many relationships slowly become competitions. I cooked dinner yesterday. I apologized last time. I always text first. I do more around the house. I care more than they do. Without realizing it, love becomes accounting. Every act of kindness demands repayment. Every sacrifice expects equal compensation. But genuine love doesn't thrive where people constantly calculate fairness. Imagine if parents raised children this way. I changed your diapers for 2 years, so now you owe me exactly this much affection. The idea sounds absurd. Healthy love gives generously because giving itself expresses love. Of course, healthy relationships should involve mutual effort. One-sided relationships eventually become unhealthy. But mutual effort is different from constant scorekeeping. One builds partnership, the other builds resentment. Perhaps this is why generosity has such quiet power. Generosity assumes that love is abundant rather than scarce. Scarcity says, if I give too much, I'll lose. Abundance says, the right relationship grows stronger when both people give freely. Notice that the healthiest couples often compete in only one area, not over who receives more, but over who can serve more lovingly. Each person's kindness inspires the other. Respect creates more respect. Patience encourages more patience. Forgiveness invites forgiveness. Generosity multiplies itself. This cycle doesn't happen automatically. Someone has to choose it first. Someone must decide to respond differently than instinct suggests. Someone must interrupt the pattern of pride, blame, and selfishness. That first step almost always feels like sacrifice. Yet, it often becomes the beginning of healing. There is a reason why the strongest relationships are also the safest places to fail. People are free to admit mistakes because they know mistakes won't automatically end the relationship. That safety encourages honesty. And honesty deepens trust. Ironically, trying to appear perfect often creates emotional distance. Pretending to have no weaknesses forces us to hide. Hiding prevents intimacy. Love cannot fully grow where masks never come off. Perhaps real courage isn't pretending to be flawless. Perhaps courage is allowing another imperfect human being to see your imperfections and choosing to remain honest anyway. That vulnerability requires sacrifice. You sacrifice certainty. You sacrifice complete control. You sacrifice the illusion that you can never be hurt. But in return, something extraordinary becomes possible. Connection. Real connection. Not based on performance. Not based on perfection. But based on two imperfect people repeatedly choosing truth, grace, humility, and commitment. Years from now, people may admire the strength of a relationship without ever seeing the thousands of invisible sacrifices that made it possible. They'll notice the laughter, but not the forgiveness that preserved it. They'll admire the trust, but not the honesty that built it. They'll envy the peace, but not the countless moments when pride was quietly laid aside for the sake of love. Perhaps that has always been the hidden work of love, not demanding perfection from another person, but becoming the kind of person who understands that the greatest victories are often the ones where no one wins the argument, because both people choose to protect something far more valuable than being right. By now, you might be asking an important question. If love requires sacrifice, how do we know when our sacrifices are building something beautiful and when they're slowly destroying us? It's one of the most important questions anyone can ask. Because not every sacrifice is an expression of love. Sometimes, sacrifice is an expression of fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of starting over. Fear of believing that this is the best we deserve. And unless we learn to recognize the difference, we may mistake unhealthy endurance for genuine devotion. Many people hear messages about unconditional love and quietly translate them into something dangerous. They begin to believe that loving someone means tolerating anything. Constant disrespect, repeated betrayal, emotional manipulation, verbal abuse, even violence. But that isn't love. Love never asks you to surrender your dignity. Love never requires you to erase your identity. Love never celebrates your suffering. Healthy sacrifice and unhealthy self-destruction may look similar from the outside, but internally, they are completely different. One is rooted in freedom, the other is rooted in fear. Think about a bridge. A well-designed bridge carries weight every single day. Cars cross it, trucks cross it, storms shake it. The bridge was built for that purpose. But if the weight placed upon it constantly exceeds what it was designed to carry, eventually cracks begin to appear. If those cracks are ignored long enough, collapse becomes inevitable. Human hearts work much the same way. We are capable of carrying burdens. We can forgive. We can be patient. We can endure difficult seasons. But we were never designed to carry endless disrespect without repair. Every healthy relationship understands something simple. Sacrifice must flow in both directions. Not always equally. Not always at the same time. Life isn't that predictable. Sometimes one partner gives more because the other is grieving. Sometimes one sacrifices more because illness has changed everything. Sometimes careers, children, or unexpected crises temporarily shift the balance. That's normal. Love isn't about perfect equality every day. It's about mutual willingness over time. Both people remain committed to protecting each other. Both continue growing. Both remain teachable. Both care when the other is hurting. That's the difference. Imagine rowing a boat across a lake. If both people row together, progress may be slow, but the boat moves steadily toward its destination. If only one person rows, while the other refuses to help, the boat begins turning in circles. Eventually, the one doing all the work becomes exhausted. Not because rowing is impossible, because rowing alone was never the design. Relationships function the same way. Love asks for sacrifice, but it also invites partnership. Without partnership, sacrifice slowly turns into resentment. Resentment rarely appears overnight. It grows quietly, one unnoticed disappointment, then another, until one day a person says, "I don't even know who I am anymore." That sentence is heartbreaking because it reveals something precious has been lost. Healthy love should help you become more fully yourself, not less. It should challenge your selfishness without erasing your personality. It should encourage growth without demanding the abandonment of your values. It should stretch your patience without destroying your peace. This is why boundaries are not the opposite of love. They are one of its strongest protectors. Imagine a beautiful garden with no fence. Anyone can walk through it. Anyone can damage it. Anyone can take from it without giving anything back. Eventually, even the healthiest garden begins to wither. A fence doesn't exist because the flowers hate people. It exists because beauty requires protection. Boundaries work the same way. They protect what is valuable. They teach others how to love us well. And surprisingly, they also teach us how to love others well. Because boundaries create clarity. Clarity prevents resentment. Resentment quietly poisons affection. There is another misunderstanding that often confuses people. Some believe sacrifice means always saying yes. But sometimes the most loving word is no. No to dishonesty. No to manipulation. No to destructive habits. No to choices that slowly damage the relationship. Parents understand this instinctively. Imagine a child asking to eat candy for every meal. A loving parent refuses, not because they enjoy disappointing their child, because love thinks beyond the present moment. Real love asks, what will help this person flourish in the long run? Not simply, what keeps them happy today? This principle applies to adult relationships too. Encouraging someone's harmful behavior isn't kindness. Avoiding every difficult conversation isn't peace. Remaining silent while someone destroys themselves isn't compassion. Sometimes love sacrifices temporary comfort in order to protect someone's future. That kind of courage is difficult. It risks misunderstanding. It risks conflict. It risks rejection. But genuine love has always cared more about another person's well-being than temporary approval. Perhaps you've experienced this from someone in your own life. A mentor who challenged you. A friend who confronted you with honesty. A parent who refused to let you settle for less than your potential. At the time, it may not have felt pleasant. Years later, you recognized it as love. Because true love isn't always comfortable, but it is always aimed toward growth. One of the clearest signs of healthy sacrifice is this. After giving, both people become stronger, not weaker, more secure, not more fearful, more honest, not more controlled, more peaceful, not more anxious. Growth may be slow, healing may take time, but the overall direction moves toward life. Unhealthy sacrifice moves the opposite direction. Hope slowly disappears. Confidence fades. Joy becomes unfamiliar. Fear begins making every decision. If that is happening consistently, the answer is not simply to sacrifice more. The answer is to ask difficult questions. Is there mutual respect? Is there accountability? Is there genuine effort from both people? Is there safety? Is there truth? because love cannot grow where these foundations are continually rejected. One of the greatest acts of wisdom is recognizing that love requires both a soft heart and clear eyes. A soft heart forgives. Clear eyes recognize reality. A soft heart offers grace. Clear eyes refuse denial. A soft heart hopes for change. Clear eyes understand that real change requires action, not promises alone. Holding these two qualities together is incredibly difficult. Yet mature love depends upon both. Perhaps that is why wisdom is inseparable from love. Emotion alone cannot sustain a relationship. Neither can sacrifice alone. Love must also be guided by discernment, the ability to recognize what builds life and what slowly destroys it. As we grow older, many of us discover that love is less about finding the perfect person and more about becoming the kind of person capable of loving wisely. Wisely enough to forgive. Wisely enough to confront. Wisely enough to wait. Wisely enough to leave when necessary. Wisely enough to stay when staying helps both people become better. That balance is not easy. In fact, it may be one of the hardest lessons life ever teaches. But once we understand it, sacrifice no longer feels like blind suffering. It becomes an intentional gift, given freely, protected by wisdom, strengthened by truth, and sustained by hope, because the highest form of love has never been about losing yourself for another person. It has always been about choosing, day after day, to become the best version of yourself while helping someone else become the best version of theirs. That is the kind of sacrifice that changes lives. Have you ever wondered why some people become gentler as they grow older while others become harder? Both have experienced disappointment. Both have suffered loss. Both have been misunderstood. Both have watched dreams fall apart. Yet somehow, one person becomes more compassionate while the other becomes more guarded. The difference is often found in how they chose to love. Because love does something extraordinary. It doesn't only shape relationships, it shapes character. Most people enter relationships asking, "What kind of person am I looking for?" It seems like the obvious question. We make lists in our minds. Kind, loyal, funny, successful, emotionally mature, supportive. These qualities certainly matter. But there is another question that is even more important. What kind of person am I becoming? That question changes everything. Because the greatest gift of love isn't simply finding someone extraordinary. It is allowing love to transform us into someone extraordinary. Think about patience. No one wakes up one morning and suddenly becomes deeply patient. Patience is developed through moments when impatience would have been easier. Every delayed answer, every misunderstanding, every inconvenience, every difficult conversation, each one becomes an opportunity. Either frustration grows or patience grows. The same is true of forgiveness. Forgiveness is rarely learned during peaceful seasons. It is learned after disappointment, after betrayal, after unmet expectations, after wounds that tempt us to hold on to resentment forever. Every painful experience places us at a crossroads. One path leads toward bitterness. The other leads toward healing. Neither path is easy, but only one allows love to continue growing. Perhaps this is why sacrifice changes us so profoundly. Every time we willingly place another person's well-being alongside our own, we slowly weaken the grip of selfishness. Not because our needs disappear, but because our hearts become larger. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack every day. At first, the weight feels unbearable. Your shoulders ache. Your muscles complain. You wonder if you'll ever become strong enough. Yet, after months of carrying that same weight, something remarkable happens. The weight hasn't changed. You have. Your strength quietly grew while you weren't paying attention. Love works much the same way. The small sacrifices that once felt impossible gradually become part of who you are. Listening becomes easier. Forgiveness becomes quicker. Generosity becomes more natural. Compassion becomes your instinct instead of your exception. This transformation doesn't happen because life became easier. It happens because your heart became stronger. That may be one of the greatest miracles hidden inside love. The sacrifices we make for healthy relationships rarely diminish us. Instead, they expand our capacity to care. Of course, there will always be moments when giving feels costly. There will be evenings when you're too tired to have another conversation. Days when misunderstanding leaves you discouraged. Weeks when life feels so overwhelming that even simple kindness requires enormous effort. Those moments are real. Pretending otherwise helps no one. But it is precisely in those moments that love quietly asks, "Who are you becoming?" Not, "How do you feel right now?" Feelings matter. They deserve attention. But they are not always reliable guides. Some mornings you won't feel grateful. That doesn't mean gratitude has no value. Some days, you won't feel courageous. That doesn't mean courage is unnecessary. Some seasons, you won't feel deeply in love. That doesn't mean love has disappeared. It may simply mean love has entered a different stage. The stage where emotions no longer carry the relationship by themselves. The stage where character begins carrying what feelings alone cannot. Many of history's greatest acts of love were not driven by overwhelming emotion. They were driven by conviction. A conviction that another person's life mattered. A conviction that kindness was worth choosing. A conviction that faithfulness remained valuable even when it became difficult. Conviction outlasts emotion. That is why character matters so much. Character continues acting wisely even when emotions fluctuate. And perhaps that explains why some relationships survive decades of changing circumstances. Youth fades. Appearances change. Careers rise and fall. Children grow up. Health shifts unexpectedly. Entire seasons of life come and go. If love depended only on happiness, very few relationships would survive those changes. But when love is rooted in commitment, respect, sacrifice, and shared purpose, it becomes remarkably resilient. It bends without breaking. It adapts without losing itself. It learns without surrendering its values. There is another beautiful truth that often goes unnoticed. The sacrifices we make are remembered long after the details have been forgotten. Years from now, your children may not remember every gift you bought them, but they'll remember your presence, your encouragement, your consistency, your willingness to show up. Your spouse may forget the expensive anniversary dinner, but they'll remember how safe they felt sharing their fears with you. Your closest friends may not remember every conversation, but they'll remember who stayed when everyone else disappeared. Presence. Perhaps that is the greatest sacrifice of all, because in today's world, attention has become one of the rarest gifts anyone can give. We live surrounded by distractions, notification, deadlines, entertainment, endless information competing for every moment of our focus. To truly be present with another human being has become increasingly uncommon. Yet, presence quietly says, "For this moment, you matter more than everything trying to pull me away." That message cannot be purchased. It cannot be imitated. It can only be lived. Perhaps that's why some of our most meaningful memories involve surprisingly ordinary moments. A late-night conversation, a quiet walk, sitting together without needing to fill every silence, holding someone's hand while they cry, watching the sunset without looking at a screen. None of these moments seem extraordinary while they're happening. Only later do we realize they became unforgettable. Not because they were exciting, because they were real. Real love has a way of making ordinary moments sacred. It teaches us that greatness is often hidden inside consistency. Not dramatic gestures performed once, but faithful choices repeated thousands of times. There is something deeply comforting about that. It means you don't have to change someone's life through one extraordinary act. You change it through countless ordinary ones. A kind word, a patient response, an honest apology, a warm embrace, a quiet prayer, a faithful promise kept. These simple acts rarely receive applause, but together they become the architecture of a meaningful life. And one day, perhaps many years from now, when people remember you, they probably won't begin by describing your achievements. They'll remember how you made them feel, whether they felt seen, whether they felt valued, whether they felt safe, whether they felt loved. Because in the end, success impresses people. Love transforms them. And maybe that is the greatest mystery of all. We often believe our sacrifices are changing someone else. Sometimes they are, but far more often, they are changing us. Quietly, patiently, one choice at a time, until we slowly become the very kind of person we once hoped to find in someone else. And when that happens, we discover something extraordinary. Love was never only about finding happiness. It was always about becoming someone capable of giving it. As we come to the end of this journey, let's return to the sentence that began it all. Love is not just a feeling of happiness. Love is a willingness to sacrifice. At first, it sounds simple, perhaps even obvious. But if you've truly reflected on these words, you may have realized they carry a completely different meaning than most of us were taught. Because somewhere along the way, many of us began believing that love exists mainly to satisfy us, to make us feel understood, to make us feel appreciated, to make us feel complete. And while healthy love certainly brings all of those gifts, they are not where love begins. They are where love often arrives. The journey starts somewhere much quieter. It begins the first time you choose patience instead of anger. The first time you forgive when resentment seems easier. The first time you stay present during another person's pain instead of escaping into your own comfort. Those moments rarely feel dramatic, yet they become the turning points that shape an entire life. Imagine looking back on your life many decades from now. Your career will eventually end. The awards you earned may gather dust. Technology will become outdated. The trends everyone once chased will be forgotten. Even your greatest achievements will slowly fade from public memory. But something else will remain. The way you loved people. That legacy survives longer than almost anything else. Think about the people you still remember with deep affection. Perhaps a grandparent whose gentle voice always made you feel safe. Perhaps a teacher who believed in you before anyone else did. Perhaps a friend who stayed when everyone else walked away. Maybe they were never famous. Maybe they never became wealthy. Maybe the world never celebrated their name. Yet their influence continues living inside you. Why? Because genuine love has a remarkable way of outlasting time. It leaves fingerprints on the human heart. Sometimes we underestimate the power of ordinary kindness because it doesn't produce immediate results. A conversation ends. A hug lasts only seconds. A kind word disappears into the air. It can seem as though these small moments vanish almost instantly, but they don't. Human hearts remember far more than we realize. A child who grows up feeling consistently loved carries that security into adulthood. A friend who receives compassion during their darkest season often becomes more compassionate toward others. Someone who experiences forgiveness learns that mistakes do not have to become permanent identities. Love has a way of multiplying itself. Every sincere act of kindness plants a seed. You may never witness where all those seeds eventually grow, but that doesn't mean they stop growing. Consider how one encouraging sentence can completely alter the direction of someone's life. A teacher says, "I believe you can do this." Years later, that student becomes a doctor, or an artist, or a parent who raises children with confidence instead of fear. That teacher may never connect those dots. Yet, the influence continues. Love often works invisibly. Its greatest victories are rarely announced. There are no headlines celebrating every act of forgiveness. No television broadcasts honoring every quiet sacrifice made inside ordinary families. No awards for every spouse who chooses patience after another exhausting day. No ceremonies for every friend who answers a midnight phone call. And yet society depends on these unseen acts. Without them, trust disappears. Families weaken. Communities become colder. Hope slowly fades. The world is held together by countless people whose names most of us will never know. People who simply choose love again, and again, and again. Perhaps that is why real love is so powerful. It does not wait for perfect circumstances. It creates light inside imperfect ones. Think about a candle in a dark room. The darkness doesn't disappear because someone argued with it. It disappears because someone brought light. Love works in much the same way. It doesn't overcome hatred by becoming more hateful. It doesn't heal pain by creating more pain. It transforms people because it consistently offers something different. Patience where anger was expected. Grace where judgment seemed inevitable. Hope where despair had taken root. This does not happen because loving people are weak. It happens because they are strong enough to choose a response greater than their first impulse. That strength is built over years. One sacrifice at a time. One decision at a time. One ordinary day at a time. Eventually, something beautiful begins to happen. Love stops feeling like something you perform. It becomes part of who you are. You no longer help people simply because you expect gratitude. You help because generosity has become your character. You no longer forgive only when it's easy. You forgive because peace has become more valuable than revenge. You no longer remain faithful because someone is watching. You remain faithful because integrity has become your identity. That is the hidden destination of every healthy sacrifice. It reshapes the soul. Of course, none of us will do this perfectly. There will be moments when impatience wins. Moments when fear speaks louder than faith. Moments when pride refuses to let humility enter the room. Every one of us will fail. Every one of us will hurt people we genuinely love. That truth should not discourage us. It should humble us. Because, if we need grace from others, then surely others will need grace from us. Perhaps this is why forgiveness is not simply one chapter of love. It is woven through every chapter. Every lasting relationship is built by imperfect people who repeatedly choose reconciliation over resentment. Not because forgetting is easy, not because healing happens overnight, but because they understand something deeply important. Love always looks toward restoration whenever restoration is possible. As you finish listening today, don't simply ask yourself whether someone loves you enough. That question has its place. But there is another question that may change your life far more profoundly. Ask yourself, who is my love helping me become? Is it making you more patient, more honest, more courageous, more generous, more compassionate, more faithful? Because if the answer is yes, then your love is already producing one of life's greatest treasures. Not perfection, transformation, and maybe that has been the true purpose of love all along. Not merely to make our happiest moments brighter, but to shape us into people capable of bringing light into someone else's darkest ones. So today, before you leave, remember this simple truth. Happiness is a beautiful gift, but it comes and goes. Feelings rise and fall. Circumstances change. People grow older. Life becomes unpredictable. Yet one thing always remains within our control. The choice to love. The choice to forgive. The choice to remain kind. The choice to sacrifice. Not because sacrifice is easy. Not because sacrifice always receives recognition. But because every act of genuine love leaves behind something far more valuable than comfort. It leaves behind character. It leaves behind trust. It leaves behind hope. And, ultimately, it leaves behind a life that reminds everyone it touches that love was never meant to be measured by how much happiness it gave us. It was always meant to be measured by how much goodness it inspired us to give away. So the next time someone asks you what love really is, don't begin with flowers. Don't begin with romance. Don't begin with happiness. Begin with this. Love is the quiet decision to keep choosing another person's good, even when doing so asks something of you. Because that decision made over and over again is what transforms ordinary relationships into extraordinary legacies. And perhaps, in the end, that is the closest thing to real love any of us will ever know.